Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take those essential, universal conversations, the ones that happen every single week, and we really break down everything you need to know to move beyond just, small talk. And today, we are tackling the king of all conversation starters. What are you doing this weekend?
Yeah, that question, it seems so simple, doesn't it? Deceptively simple. But how we answer it, how we plan for the weekend, even how we talk about it afterwards, it's actually a crucial barometer of our modern lives.
The barometer? How so?
Well, it's like a window, isn't it? A window into our stress levels, what we value, even the future of work itself. It tells you a lot.
Absolutely. So our mission for you today is, it's a deep analysis of free time. We want to give you the linguistic toolkit, sure, but also the analytical concepts you need to discuss the psychology underneath it all.
The societal pressures, the global structures that define our downtime. Basically, it's the shortcut to being truly well-informed about the break.
Right. We'll start with the practical stuff.
Yeah.
Language for planning, signaling certainty, telling stories about your weekend.
Then we'll dig into the emotional side, things like the infamous Sunday Scaries. Why do we feel that way?
The Sunday Scaries. Definitely need to cover those.
And we'll finish up looking at the bigger picture, how technology, new economic models, how they're fundamentally reshaping what the weekend even means around the world.
Okay, let's dive in. Section 1, the practical foundation, the planning phase. So if you're kicking off the conversation, the absolute go-to question is just, what are you doing this weekend?
Right, that's the standard, yeah. Or if you want to sound maybe slightly more considered, you could ask, do you have any plans for the weekend?
Okay, subtle difference. And for answering.
The key structure, the real workhorse, is using that simple future. I'm going to activity. It works for everything. I'm going to do some chores. I'm going to relax. I'm going to go shopping.
Simple enough.
Yeah.
But let's level up from the basics. How do we add more richness, signal our intentions better? You mentioned specific verbs.
Exactly. Instead of just saying you're walking outside, if it's something more strenuous, you'd say, I'm going for a hike.
Right, that paints a much clearer picture. More demanding.
Or think about social plans. You don't just see friends you haven't connected with in a while. The specific verb is key. I'm going to catch up with friends.
Ah, yes, catch up. That phrase is so loaded, isn't it? It's not just being in the same room. It implies sharing news, finding out what's been going on. It's about the reconnection itself.
Precisely. That's often the whole point of social weekend time. And if you're hosting, you'd say something like having friends over for dinner or having a barbecue.
Got it. Now, what about when plans are really locked in, like tickets are bought, arrangements confirmed? How do you signal that level of certainty?
That's where you use the present continuous tense. This is a really useful tool.
You mean saying things like, I'm meeting my sister for lunch on Saturday, or we're flying to Spain on Friday night?
Exactly those. Using the present continuous for a future event implies certainty. It signals to the listener that this isn't just a vague idea, it's confirmed, definite, probably unchangeable.
Okay, that makes sense. It leaves no room for doubt. But let's be real. Certainty is often a luxury, especially on a Friday afternoon. What about the language we need for plans that are more flexible or just uncertain?
Right. Very common situation. That's when you need to soften the language. You use phrases like, I'm thinking of activity, or I might see a movie. See the difference?
Yeah, it's less definite, more open.
And crucially, you can manage expectations with conditional phrases. Things like, depending on the weather, or depending on how I feel.
That's useful hedging language.
Very. And if things are really up in the air, the key phrase is, we haven't made any firm plans yet. Clear, polite, manages expectations.
Okay, that language of flexibility is sort of leads us into the psychology of it all, which we'll get to. But first, let's quickly wrap up section 1 with the Monday morning debrief. Planning is one skill, but reporting back, that's a whole different conversational test, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The language requirement flips completely. You're moving from intention, from the future, to reporting on the past. So simple past tense.
And a core challenge there.
Honestly. Nailing those common irregular verbs, it sounds basic, but mastering went, saw, had, did. That's probably 90% of structuring your weekend story. Fluency really shows here.
Good point. And any techniques for making that Monday morning chat smoother?
Yeah, a really effective way to start is with a single high-impact adjective. Set the scene immediately. Was your weekend relaxing? Was it busy? Maybe eventful.
Ah, okay. So frame the vibe right away.
Exactly. Then use simple sequencing words first. Then, after that, finally, just to give your story a clear timeline. Makes it easy to follow.
Right. The structure is key.
And the absolute crucial final step. Loop the conversation back. It just dies if you tell your story and stop. You have to ask, what about you? Or how about your weekend?
Essential conversational dynamics. Okay, great toolkit there. Now let's shift into section 2, the psychology of the break. This is where the language, I think, gets even richer and more revealing. We talked about intentions.
If you're feeling stressed out from the week, your intention isn't likely to have a busy weekend. You're probably aiming for something laid back.
Laid back, meaning low pressure, relaxed.
Yeah, and if you actually achieve that feeling, it's often because you managed to, use recovery language effectively. The goal might be to wind down. That implies a gradual relaxation.
Yeah.
Or maybe to recharge your batteries. That one specifically suggests getting your energy back, often by deliberately switching off from work, from screens, from the usual grind.
Okay, winding down, recharging batteries. Got it. But let's face it, plans don't always work out.
Yeah.
I want to spend a moment here on the difference you mentioned between a plan falling through and calling it off.
Yes, this is a subtle but really important distinction in how we talk about failed plans. If a plan fell through, it generally implies external reasons beyond your control.
Like the weather was terrible or the restaurant booking got canceled.
Exactly. Something happened to the plan. But if we called it off, that implies an active decision we made. Maybe we were too tired. Maybe we just changed our minds.
So passive versus active, that's a neat distinction. And even if the main plan fails, sometimes you do something else unexpectedly. There's a great phrasal verb for that, isn't there?
There is. And then we ended up doing, it perfectly captures that contrast between what you intended and what actually happened.
Give me an example.
We were planning to go hiking, but it rained, so we ended up going to the museum instead. Or we were going to stay in, but we ended up going to that new bar down the street. It's the language of the happy, or maybe sometimes unhappy, accident.
Right. The unexpected outcome. Now, for the advanced language user, say you're reflecting on the weekend and maybe feeling some regret, like you feel it was wasted because something unexpected happened or didn't happen. You mentioned the third conditional.
Yes, this is for speculating about a past that didn't happen. It's how you articulate that alternative reality, often tinged with a bit of regret or wistfulness. If the weather had been better, we would have gone for that hike. Or if I hadn't felt so tired, I would have gone to the party. It shows high language command, sure, but more importantly, it verbalizes that internal conflict, what you wanted versus what actually occurred.
That's powerful. Okay, sticking with intention and structure, let's talk about how we actually structure the break itself, the ultimate prize for many, the long weekend.
Ah, yes, the 3-day break, often thanks to a bank holiday or a public holiday, depending on where you are. Its significance is huge, isn't it?
Why is that extra day so crucial?
Because it gives you the necessary breathing room for proper travel, maybe, but crucially, for genuine switching off. That mental decompression often doesn't really kick in until Saturday evening for many people, so having Sunday and Monday is essential for real recovery.
That makes sense. And that desire to switch off often drives the idea of a getaway, right? A short trip.
Exactly. The primary goal of a getaway is often just a change of scenery. Getting out of your normal environment helps disengage the brain from routine, from work thoughts.
But what if time or money is tight? We hear a lot about the staycation.
The staycation. A blend of stay and vacation. But a successful staycation isn't just about, lounging around at home doing nothing, though. That can be part of it.
What makes it successful then?
It's usually a conscious effort to play tourist in your own town, re-experiencing familiar places, trying new local restaurants, basically transforming the familiar into something novel and enjoyable.
Okay, structure's covered. Now for the tricky part, the emotional pitfalls. We absolutely have to talk about that collective dread, the phenomenon known as the Sunday Scaries.
Oh, yes. That wave of, anxiety, maybe some sadness, a general sense of unease that creeps in as Sunday afternoon or evening wears on.
Where does it come from?
Psychologists linked it pretty closely to the impending loss of freedom and autonomy as the work week approaches. Some analyses even use really strong terms like a sense of impending doom.
Wow, impending doom. That's intense. And that feeling, that dread, it can be magnified if you had really high hopes for the weekend that weren't met, right? The anticlimax.
Exactly. When highly anticipated plans just don't live up to the hype, you can feel this acute sense of disappointment. And often that hype is fueled by external pressure.
The pressure for the perfect weekend.
Yeah, the Instagrammable weekend. This leads to what some call performing leisure, where the focus shifts from actually relaxing or enjoying the experience to documenting it for social validation.
So you're performing enjoyment rather than actually feeling recovered.
Precisely. And if those high intentions crash into reality, maybe because of exhaustion or just decision fatigue, not being able to decide what to do, you hit the third pitfall, the wasted weekend.
That awful feeling of regret.
Yeah.
That sense that time was just poorly used, maybe defaulted to passive stuff like endless scrolling on your phone.
Exactly, that feeling of inertia. It's a really common source of weekend regret.
Is there anything people do to cope with that, especially the Sunday Scaries?
Well, one strategy some people use, it's a bit controversial maybe, is micro doing a bit of work on Sunday night.
Like checking emails or planning the week.
Yeah, maybe just 30 minutes of planning for Monday. The idea is to reduce the shock factor of Monday morning. It's a form of emotional coping, trying to regain a sense of control.
I can see the logic, even if it eats into the weekend a bit. Now, speaking of recovery, we need to clarify different types of free time. Our sources distinguish them.
They do. There's downtime. That's pure recovery, the absence of obligation, letting your brain just idle or decompress, no specific goal other than rest.
Okay, downtime. And the other type.
Leisure pursuits. These are active choices, things you do specifically for enjoyment. Hobbies, sports, creative activities.
Which reminds me of that old proverb, a change is as good as a rest.
Exactly. It suggests that engaging a different part of your brain, doing something you enjoy, even if it's active, can be just as restorative, maybe even more so, than pure passive downtime. The change itself is refreshing.
That's a great insight. Okay, let's widen the lens now for section 3. This whole idea of Saturday and Sunday being the weekend. It's not even universal, is it?
Not at all. It's a crucial reminder. The Western Saturday-Sunday model is entirely a social agreement, a cultural construct. Our sources highlight, for instance, that in many Middle Eastern countries, the traditional weekend is Friday and Saturday.
Not Friday, Saturday.
Because Friday is often the main day for congregational prayer and community gathering, so the whole rhythm of the week is different.
It's a powerful reminder of how culture shapes something as fundamental as our weekly schedule. But even in places with the Saturday-Sunday model, the idea of shared downtime seems to be fracturing.
Dramatically. The traditional weekend is increasingly becoming a privilege, isn't it? Think about the gig economy, people working flexible but unpredictable hours. Or essential shift workers, nurses, police, retail staff.
For schedules are completely different.
They're asynchronous, meaning they're out of sync with the main community rhythm. This can lead to what sociologists call social dislocation.
Social dislocation, meaning?
You might have flexibility, which sounds good, but you miss out on those key social moments, the barbecues, the parties, the family gatherings, because everyone else is off when you're working, and vice versa.
That makes sense. A potential downside to flexibility. And for those who do have the traditional break, you talked about the pressure to perform leisure.
Yeah, it's relentless. Fueled by FOMO, the fear of missing out, and what's called the experience economy.
The experience economy.
Yeah, where value is placed on experiences rather than just goods. So we spend, sometimes huge amounts, on unique trips, concerts, fancy meals, partly because they make good stories, good social media posts. It's a modern form of conspicuous consumption, showing status through experiences.
But this pressure is also creating pushback,
Oh,
right? Counter movements.
Definitely. We're seeing the rise of JOMO, the joy of missing out, people actively choosing not to do everything, embracing quiet, reclaiming their time from that pressure.
JOMO, I like that.
And related to that is slow living. This movement prioritizes quality over quantity, depth over breadth, focusing on intangible assets like peace of mind, strong relationships, connection with nature, rather than packed, expensive, Instagrammable itineraries.
So rejecting the weekend pressure cooker.
Exactly. It's about defining your own terms for rest and enjoyment.
This whole tension really sets us up perfectly for the future of work and free time. It brings us to a core philosophical question. Are you aiming for work-life balance or work-life integration?
That's a key distinction. Work-life balance traditionally views work and life as two separate things. You need a firm boundary between them. Think of the sacred weekend boundary often observed in places like Scandinavia. Work stops Friday, doesn't restart till Monday.
Okay, separation and integration.
Work-life integration is the opposite philosophy. It sees work and personal life as interwoven. Flexibility is prioritized over strict separation. So someone might check work emails on a Sunday evening, but they might also take a longer lunch break on Tuesday for a personal appointment or work from home more often. It's about blending, not separating.
And technology is obviously a huge driver of this shift towards integration, isn't it?
Oh, massively. constant connectivity, remote work capabilities, they've caused a true paradigm shift. Some call it the death of geographical constraint.
The death of geographical constraint.
Yeah, the digital nomad is the ultimate symbol of this, right? Someone working from anywhere with an internet connection. Their weekend might be Tuesday and Wednesday, working intensely Saturday and Sunday. The traditional boundaries just dissolve.
Which leads to these bigger, almost post-work questions. If automation continues, if the need for traditional full-time work reduces, what happens to the weekend then? Does the concept just dissolve entirely?
It could, and this raises a really fascinating, maybe slightly worrying question that sort of summarizes our whole discussion. Have we as a society lost the skill of leisure?
The skill of leisure. What do you mean by that?
The ability to actively structure and find meaning in our free time beyond just passive consumption or being directed by work schedules. If we suddenly had much more free time, would we know what to do with it constructively?
That's a deep question. It really shows how that simple opening line, "What are you doing this weekend?" holds up a mirror to, well, everything. Our work, our values, our anxieties, our relationship with time itself.
Absolutely.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, practically? We want to encourage you to maybe think about drafting your own personal weekend manifesto.
A weekend manifesto. I like that.
Yeah. It's about shifting from being just a passive recipient of the weekend, dictated by habit or pressure, to becoming an active architect of your own time.
Okay, so what should be in this manifesto?
3 key things based on our discussion. First, what is the primary purpose of your weekend, most weekends? Is it purely to recharge your batteries for Monday? Is it about connection with people? Or is it about active leisure, pursuing hobbies? Define your main goal.
Okay, purpose first. What's second?
Second, what's your ideal ratio of downtime? That pure unstructured decompression versus active leisure pursuits. Do you need more quiet idling time? Or do you feel more rested after engaging in a hobby you love, knowing that ratio is key?
Right, the balance between doing nothing and doing something enjoyable. And third.
And finally, the crucial part. How will you actively protect it? How will you set boundaries, maybe against work creep, maybe against social pressure? How will you manage those Sunday scaries based on your defined purpose and ratio?
Purpose, ratio, protection. That's a really actionable framework.
We think so. It covers everything from, using the third conditional to reflect on past weekends, right up to the death of geographical constraint. But look, here's one final provocative thought for you to chew on this week. It builds directly on that balance versus integration distinction we talked about.
Okay, let's hear it.
If culture and work schedules didn't dictate Saturday and Sunday, if you could choose any 2 days to be your ideal weekend, based purely on your own personal energy needs, your body clock, your social rhythms, what 2 days would you truly choose?
Ooh, that's a tough one. It really forces you to question the assumptions we just accept about how time should be structured.
Exactly. What would your ideal rhythm look like, free from external constraints? Something powerful to think about.
Definitely food for thought.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the weekend. Until next time.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling something that seems so simple, but is actually one of the most complex parts of our lives. We're talking about the weekend.
Think about it. How was your weekend? You've probably said it or heard it a bunch of times already this week, right? But what's really hiding behind that question? Well, there's a ton of social pressure, a few psychological traps, and even some pretty big economic forces at play. So let's really dig into it. And we're going to start with the words we use to even talk about it.
All right, first up, the language of leisure. The words we pick when someone asks about our weekend. They say so much more than just what we did. They're like a little window into our stress levels, what we really wanted to do, and how we actually feel about taking a break.
So, our language around the weekend totally evolves. We might start with something really straightforward, like, I'm going to clean my house. Simple, right? But if you really listen to how people talk, you start to pick up on these more subtle phrases. And they're packed with all this hidden social meaning.
Okay, so check this out. When you say, I'm meeting my sister for lunch, that signals something really specific. It's certain. It's a done deal, probably already in the calendar. But what if you say, I might see a movie? Totally different vibe, right? That's all about flexibility. And my personal favorite is when you hear, we ended up just ordering pizza. That little phrase, ended up, it perfectly captures that classic gap between our grand ambitions for the weekend and, well, reality.
Before we go any further, let's get a couple of key terms straight. First up, downtime. And this is important. Downtime is not the same as having fun. It's all about recovery.
It's that time with zero obligations, when you just let your brain switch off and decompress from all the chaos of the week.
Leisure, on the other hand, is active. This is your hobbies, gardening, learning guitar, going for a hike. Yeah, it takes some effort, but it's that good kind of effort, the kind that actually recharges your batteries instead of draining them.
And this is where that old saying, "a change is as good as a rest," really hits home. It nails the power of leisure perfectly. Sometimes, just switching gears and using a different part of your brain can be every bit as refreshing as just, doing nothing. The change itself becomes the rest. So we've got downtime and we've got leisure. But what happens inside our heads when we're trying to get that balance right? Well, that's where the psychology of the weekend comes in. All that pressure creates some pretty powerful and honestly stressful emotional traps. Let's start with one I'm sure we all know a little too well: the Sunday Scaries. Ugh! It's that unique cocktail of anxiety and dread that just starts to creep in as Sunday evening rolls around. Suddenly, your freedom is slipping through your fingers, your brain is already picturing Monday's inbox, and boom, the last precious hours of your weekend are just gone, stolen by anxiety. And a lot of that anxiety, it's fueled by this insane pressure to have a perfect, totally Instagram-worthy weekend. We spend all week hyping it up in our minds, but then of course reality hits, and our plans don't quite match the fantasy. And what are we left with? A big sense of anticlimax. The experience just didn't live up to the hype, and we feel kind of let down. And that feeling of disappointment can spiral right into the absolute worst feeling of all: the wasted weekend. You know the one. It's that Sunday night regret when you look back and realize you spent way too many hours just scrolling on your phone instead of doing any of the things you actually wanted to do. And listen, it's not always about being lazy. A lot of the time, it's just plain old decision fatigue from the work week. Your brain is tired, so it just defaults to the easiest, most passive thing it can find. So what's going on here? What's driving all this? Well, a lot of the time, it's this internal battle between two big forces. On one side, you've got FOMO, the fear of missing out. But on the other, you have its awesome antidote, JOMO, the joy of missing out. And that's all about making that empowering choice to just embrace the quiet, to be happy with what you've decided to do, and not worry about what everyone else is up to. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second, because here's the thing. The ability to even worry about FOMO versus JOMO, that's a luxury. For millions of people, this whole idea of a predictable shared Saturday and Sunday off is just not their reality. Having a weekend is, in many ways, a form of socioeconomic privilege. I mean, just look at this contrast. The traditional weekend has this predictable shared rhythm. Everyone's kind of on the same schedule. But if you're a gig worker or a freelancer, your weekend is often totally out of sync with everyone else's. And yeah, that flexibility sounds great, but it can come with a pretty steep price, a real sense of isolation.
And there's actually a name for that feeling of being disconnected. It's called social dislocation. When your days off are, say, a Tuesday and a Wednesday, you miss out on all the stuff that happens on the actual weekend. The barbecues, the kids' soccer games, the community stuff. You're basically trying to live in a world that's running on a completely different clock than you are.
Now, for those of us who do have that traditional weekend, there's a whole other kind of tension we have to deal with. You've got the experience economy pushing us to constantly spend money on these big, memorable, shareable events. Concerts, fancy brunches, exotic trips. But pushing back against that is the whole slow living movement, which says, hey, maybe what really matters is time, intention, and simple things that don't cost a fortune. And really, this all comes down to two very different ways of thinking about work and life. You've got work-life balance, which is all about building a really strong fence between your job and your personal time. And then you've got work-life integration, which is more about weaving the two together, where flexibility is more important than a hard separation. No matter which one you prefer, the fundamental challenge is kind of the same. So, with all these different pressures pulling at us, what do? How do we move forward? Well, in this last section, we're going to look at exactly that. How we can stop just letting our weekends happen to us and instead start actively designing the kind of rest we actually need. And you know what? This whole conversation is already changing in a huge way. I'm talking about the 4-day work week. It's being tested all over the world. And it's challenging this old industrial age idea that the more hours you sit at a desk, the more productive you are. The focus is shifting to what you actually produce, not how long you're clocked in. And that could completely change the game for our free time.
But let's take it even one step further. What if we're heading toward a future where automation makes full-time work optional for a lot of people? In a world like that, in a post-work society,
The whole idea of a weekend just dissolves, right? If almost all of our time is free time, how on earth do we find a sense of purpose and structure in our lives?
This is where being intentional becomes absolutely crucial. A great place to start is by creating what you could call a personal weekend manifesto. It's simple, really. Step 1, figure out what the purpose of your weekend even is. Is it for rest, connection, adventure? Step 2, decide on your ideal mix of that downtime versus active leisure we talked about. And finally, step 3, figure out exactly how you're going to protect that time from all the other stuff that tries to creep in. Because that's really the ultimate goal here, isn't it? To shift from being this passive passenger where the weekend just happens, to being the active architect of your own time. To actually design it to give you what you genuinely need, whether that's rest or connection or just plain old joy.
And that brings us to one last really big question to chew on. If you knew for a fact that work was about to become just a tiny part of your life, what would you do differently, starting right now? What skill of leisure, like creating art, learning an instrument, or getting more involved in your community, would you start practicing today to get ready for a future where it's not your job, but your free time that truly defines who you are? Definitely something to think about.